Chapter 5. We were in the middle of playing when Paul started scratching his head. That was all Sean Delaney needed to see. He blew his whistle and stopped the rehearsal. "You can't look like a rock star and scratch your head," Sean barked. "But my head itches from the dye you used," Paul pouted. "What am I supposed to do?" Sean walked up to Paul. "Make it into a move," he said. And he took Paul's guitar and put the strap over his shoulder. "Throw the guitar behind you," he demonstrated dramatically. "Then take both of your hands and just rip into your scalp like it was on fire. Then throw your hands up in the air and walk forward like some kind of beauty model." Sean demonstrated, very accurately, a model walking the runway. And Paul's first signature stage move was born. Sean Delaney was, in my estimation, the fifth member of Criss. He was a tremendously talented creative force. He wrote great songs. He had a voice you could die for. He had flair and style. He was a great dancer. He knew theater. He had worked with Tennessee Williams. In his spare time, he was a transvestite. And he was our manager Bill Aucoin's live-in lover. We didn't know that Bill was gay when we first met him. In those days, especially if you were on the business side of music, you had to stay in the closet. But as soon as Bill became our manager, he brought Sean in to refine and expand upon our act. That's putting it mildly. Bill had met Sean at a bar in the East Village when Sean was putting together a gay band called Manhole. For some reason that project fell through, and all Sean was left with was the earrings in his nipples. The music world's loss was our gain. He was perfect for us, a multi-talented musician who knew how to create an image and put it across. He was way ahead of us at that point. The first thing Sean did was convince us to dye our hair black. "You're a band. All of you should have the same color hair. And black will really pop against the white makeup," Sean said. He took all of us down to the apartment of one of his gay friends in the village. One by one, he dyed our hair in the bathtub. When we were finished, the apartment was in shambles, but we felt great. We hit 8th Street, and everybody was looking at us. Who had ever seen a band where all four guys' hair color was exactly the same? Sean wanted to dress us in gold and black, but gold changes color under lights, so we changed it to silver and black. And the black, of course, would be leather. We used to wear studded dog collars that we'd get from pet shops, but Sean marched us to the Pleasure Chest, an S&M clothing store in the village that had a large gay clientele. That's where we got heavy studded leather dog collars and bracelets and leather vests, studded leather cock pouches and chains. Paul was chubby at that time, and Sean knew you couldn't have a fat rock star, so he had the owner of the Pleasure Chest design a custom lace-up corset to squeeze Paul's love handles in. Paul would put this leather contraption on and we would go behind it and pull the laces tight. Then Sean began to work on our stage moves. He brought us to a loft in Chinatown where his old band used to practice. Paul put up the most resistance. The two of them fought for hours. "I can't move like that, I don't look good," Paul would say. "Sure you do," Sean would respond. "Pucker up. Your lips a little more. It'll drive the girls wild." We had to block out elaborate choreography because Sean had made our platform shoes taller. They were now more than half a foot high and the guys kept falling, so he taught them how to do parachute, landing falls, and when that didn't work, he taught them how to make the falls look like part of the show and how to surreptitiously pick each other up. At first we wanted Sean to bring in a professional choreographer, so he found a famous gay guy who worked on Broadway. The guy knew nothing, so Sean intervened. His moves blew the guy away. We had come up with some great moves on our own, but the guys didn't even realize they were doing them. Ace would be sideways with his legs spread apart, then Gene would come over and put his leg between Ace's legs, and then Paul put himself at the back and they all gyrated together. Sean immediately saw that it was a dynamite move and he even named it, I think, calling it the Kiss Swerve. Sean said it was a physical representation of a musically charged orgasm. These moves weren't just for aesthetics. Sometimes Ace would get so drunk, he'd pass out while he was doing a solo. Gene and Paul would see it happening and quickly jump over him and do a little move and, by the end, lift him up. It was hard for me to play and keep a straight face. I couldn't believe what they were getting away with, making Ace's passing out part of the act. The sexual element of the stage show wasn't lost on a writer from Mandate magazine, a gay magazine that gave us one of our first positive reviews. The guy said that Paul modulates sexually across the stage, and Paul was upset. But what did he expect? He used to do a move where he'd wear a red garter belt like a stripper and come up to the lip of the stage and stick his leg out. Everyone in the audience, both male and female, would grab at it. He loved it. He couldn't wait for that moment. Paul's sexuality became a topic of speculation even for us guys in the band. Paul always loved to doodle. And he drew the best cocks in the universe. He could have gotten a job working at a gay porno magazine. He had the veins down, he had the balls just perfect. Ace would say, "You gotta suck a dick to draw a dick that good." Gene would just sit there and not say anything but smile as if to say, "You think?" Of course, one of the reasons that Paul drew such perfect penises was that he was surrounded by some great models to work from. We were young crazy guys then, and Ace and I became famous for taking our dicks out at the drop of a hat. Then we'd grab each other's dicks. It wasn't sexual, just stupid adolescent tomfoolery. Sometimes we did it to provoke Gene. We'd be putting our makeup on, I'd get a huge boner, and I'd pull my pants down and go over to Gene as he was applying his makeup and lay my boner on his shoulder. Then Ace would do the same thing on his other shoulder. Gene would scream and flip out and yell, "Get the fuck away from me." But he dug the joke. "Go over to Paul," he'd say. When we'd do that to Paul, he'd cringe. Gene and Paul never whipped their dicks out. In fact, Gene had a thing about never getting naked in front of us. He'd never shower with us after a show. Paul didn't care, but he wasn't as exhibitionistic as Ace and I were. Maybe that's because Paul and Gene came in a distant third and fourth place to Ace and me when we had a contest to see who had the biggest dick. Mine was the longest, Ace's was the fattest, and then Paul and Gene were lagging far behind. They actually named my dick. They called it the spoiler, presumably because once a woman had me, she'd be spoiled forever. Writing about this now as a 66-year-old man, it all seems so stupid. What the fuck was I thinking? But we were young and it was fun and everybody enjoyed it at the time. Ace and I were smart enough not to take our dicks out in front of Bill or Sean. Maybe because they might have videotaped them. One of Bill and Sean's great innovations when we were practicing in that loft was to video our performances and play them back to us and critique us as if they were football coaches breaking down plays. Bill had done some television directing, and he was really into the visual aspects of the show. So Sean would set up 2 cameras on either side of us, we'd get on stage in full costume and makeup and rehearse for hours, and he'd video it. When we were finished, we'd watch the whole tape back and Sean would lecture us. "Paul, you see when you do that? That's fucked up. Don't do that again. Don't open your mouth there." Or, "Peter, do you see when you do that with the sticks? I like that. Keep that in there." We'd eliminate anything that wasn't cool and keep whatever was great. It may have looked spontaneous, but every little move was planned. In our band, Sean understood and loved theatricality. We had just developed our stage characters with our makeup, but Sean made sure that we stayed in character throughout the whole show. Sean really worked with Gene to develop his whole demon persona. One time Gene stuck out his prodigious tongue at Sean to be obnoxious, and Sean claimed he had an epiphany right then and there. Gene should be a monster the whole show. So they worked on walking like a monster and not deviating from that character. Whenever Gene would break character, Sean would pull out his whistle, blow it, and stop the rehearsal. I didn't get away with anything either. The same went for Paul and Ace. Sean didn't need to do much to make sure that Ace consistently acted like a space cadet, though. What's scary is that the more we got into our roles and the makeup, the more we actually became our alter egos. Once we ditched the female eyeshadow and eyeliner and lipstick and actually created these 4 characters with full, on theatrical makeup, we transformed into different entities. Gene morphed right into a demon. That little Hasidic boy was nowhere to be found when the demon took over Gene's brain. He would spit right into our roadies' faces. Just plodding around on those platform shoes, which added to his natural height, he exuded menace. People would literally cringe in fear when he came near. Especially when he whipped out that tongue. His tongue was so long, there were rumors that he had had it cosmetically enhanced. With his tongue flicking in and out of his mouth, he looked like some demonic lizard. Gene once told me that if he could leave his makeup on all the time and never leave that persona, he would do it. Paul would literally become the star. Duh. This chubby little kid from Queens became Liza Minnelli, Rod Stewart, Mick Jagger, all beamed into one. He knew he could have any woman he wanted. He has very feminine hands, but he would use them like a Svengali on stage. Like Dracula, he'd gesture to a girl in the audience as if he was commanding her. He'd grab his face dramatically and walk along the lip of the stage and look down on the people as if they were nothing, because he was the star. And then the white light would hit him and I could see that his brain was bubbling, because everything was look at me. Look at me. Ace was a true spaceman, a guy who tripped and fell over himself because he could never quite adjust to the gravity on Earth. He actually used to say that to us, and not even when he was in costume. When I put on that cat makeup, I truly was transformed. Forget about Peter Criscuola, the kid from Brooklyn. He didn't exist. I believed I was a superhero, the most iconic cat of all cats, sitting up there overlooking my prey. I was a nasty little alley cat, ready to grab whatever I wanted. Don't get too close to me, because I might just attack. It was insane power tripping. I felt taller. My arms felt stronger. I was really transformed into this powerhouse of energy. I couldn't hit my drums hard enough. It was almost scary to feel that much power. Sean fed on that energy. I remember so many times in rehearsals when Sean would be screaming in my face to kill those drums, break those motherfuckers. It was almost militaristic, everything we did on stage was meant to annihilate. When we opened shows, our goal would be to kill so bad that the headlining act wouldn't want to come on after us. Sean helped us develop that animal instinct, and all of it began with the drums. The other guys had to keep up with me playing 50 million miles an hour. Sean worked 24/7 with us. He was like an obsessed drill sergeant. When we'd get in that rehearsal room and we're all up together on that stage, he would get in front of us and it was like he was leading the largest orchestra in the world, he was so into it. I was a nobody then, but when I was around Sean, I felt like royalty, like I was the greatest drummer in the world. Both Sean and Bill knew instinctively that it was important to treat us all like stars, and they absolutely did. Sean was also protective of us. "I'll kill any fucking body that touches you for," he told us. "I will cut their fucking throat from ear to ear. You're my babies." Sean was a tough bastard, too, and if he had to get a little tough and show his butch side to protect us, he'd put on a game face that would scare the shit out of anyone who tried to fuck with us. He also kept the peace among us. We each spent a lot of time alone with Sean, and he knew which buttons to push for each guy. He helped me with my temper, he helped Gene work on his attitude. Gene had a patronizing way of talking to the rest of us, almost as if he was back teaching 6th grade, which he had done years before. Sean saw that Paul was developing a rock star arrogance about him way before we had even released our first album. That would piss Ace off, so Sean had to be like a referee and keep the peace all the time. But when it came time to get honest feedback, we relied on Sean. He'd tell it like it was. He never bullshitted us. I got really close to Sean, or Shauna, as I used to call her when she was in drag. At first I was a little shy around him because I was this macho kid from Brooklyn. God forbid I should be hanging around with a fag, much less a tranny. He showed us photos, and he was hot when he dressed in full drag. But little by little we got close, and Sean used to love to take me to all the gay clubs in the meatpacking district of the city. One time he took me to a club and we went into the back room and there was a naked guy down on all fours. This other guy greased him up and then he rammed his fist all the way up his ass up to the elbow. "Welcome to the Fist Fuckers Club," Sean said. I gotta go now," I said to Sean. I was out of there in a flash. I will never forget that scene until the day I die. Sometimes Sean went too far around me. He would grab my ass, or grab my dick, and crunch me over. I'd chase him around and wrestle with him and throw him to the ground. Bill would do the same thing once we got to know him well. We'd be at a party at a club and I'd be in the bathroom and I'd feel somebody's hand going across the back of my butt and I'd hear, "Oh, what a cute ass you got." It would be Bill. "Get the fuck out of here," I'd say. "You've got the cutest little toilet." "I just love your butt," he'd persist. But Bill had such a sweetness to him, it just seemed playful. Sadly, Sean never got the credit he deserved for making us into superstars. If you listen to Gene or Paul, they were the driving engines behind our success, and Sean maybe helped out with a move here or there. But Sean was there from the beginning and had his hand in everything we created, from our personas to our wardrobe to our staging. He even contributed to the songs. Bill's contributions also get minimized in Gene and Paul's revisionist Kiss story. Bill helped us actualize the Beatles' concept of 4 superstars that we instinctively knew we should go for. He treated each one of us as special and gave each one of us his undivided attention. Bill thought that each of us in the band should get an equal share of the proceeds, no matter who was writing what, unlike the Beatles. We were all on stage for 2 hours a night and I was beating my drums like a motherfucker and you're playing your bass, and then when we change back into our clothes, you put on a Rolex from Tiffany's and I got a fucking Seiko? I don't think so. He knew that an unequal division of the money would just lead to chaos, especially when you're a band that comes up together from scratch. Comes up with the original ideas and concepts and battles through all the shit that's in your way. You needed some semblance of equality, and Bill knew it would be through an equal distribution of the monies. I was totally happy about this arrangement. It was all great. We were having a good time together. We were 4 brothers in a band. I wanted nothing more than that feeling of unity, being part of a band. I didn't want to run the band. I just wanted to be an equal cog. I remember one night, Gene was getting on me in his usual patronizing way about something and we started arguing forcefully and I turned to him and said, "Here's the irony. You went to college, you broke your ass in school, then you taught school. You have all this knowledge. And I never finished high school, I grew up in the streets, yet with all your vast knowledge, tonight when we get paid, I'm making the same as you. So go fuck yourself. He shut right up. There was nothing he could say after that. That was the beauty of Bill's vision. In his own way, Bill also propelled our self-esteem to the stratosphere. He encouraged us to express our feelings, and he never made us feel small or stupid for sharing them. He was a great role model for us, me especially. Sometimes he'd take us up to his place in the country and he'd whip up his famous Aucoin breakfast, scrambled eggs with vanilla extract and other exotic spices. It tasted like shit, but I ate it. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. Who had a manager who cooked for them? Bill was a mentor to me. He helped to turn me into a gentleman. He taught me etiquette. He'd make me get dressed up and then take me to a really fine restaurant and show me which cutlery to use, which wine to order, which food went with what wine. Then we'd go shopping and he tried to turn me on to Gucci loafers and expensive watches, but I'd never wear Gucci. Bill knew how insecure I was and that soon I would be in front of the eyes of the world. He wanted me to be comfortable in that role. Bill saw that Gene and Paul would pick on me because I wasn't as schooled as they were and that it hurt my heart, so he would help me with my vocabulary. Bill knew that my reacting like a tough guy to Gene and Paul was all a front. Deep down he knew I had a heart of gold and that I was really a good kid. I think that he really loved me. I know I loved him. Just like Sean, Bill was so positive and so shrewd. He did nothing on a whim, like I would. Everything he thought up was bigger and better than what any other band would do. He wouldn't shoot down any ideas. You want to fly over the audience? Why not? Be Mary Poppins. It was never no, you can't. There was nothing we couldn't try or do in Bill Aucoin's brain. So Bill and Sean added great finishing touches to the pretty crude canvas that they were presented with. And they both did it with class, style, and panache. On top of that, we had the craziest record company president around. Neil Bogart was the last Barnum and Bailey of rock and roll. He thrived on the spectacular and would spend $100 to make $1. Neil was a showman. You just had to look at what he went on to do. Besides signing us, he shepherded the Village People, Parliament/Funkadelic, and Donna Summer to superstardom. Neil was a very hands-on guy, and he immediately came up with ideas to help us refine our stage show. He was a big fan of magic, so he brought a magician up to the office one day to see what magic effects we could incorporate into the show. The magician went through his bag of tricks, and we were nixing everything until he got to fire breathing. Immediately, Ace, Paul, and I refused. "I'll try that," Gene said. The fire breathing effect was done by keeping a small amount of fuel, like kerosene, in your mouth and then blowing it into an open flame on your torch. The first time Gene tried it, he almost burned down the office. Then it became a staple in our live act. I was once talking with Neil and jokingly said that it would be cool if the drums could levitate right off the stage. We started discussing it, and we came up with the idea of using a pulley to get me into the air. We devised a drum riser that would levitate 8 feet into the air using a very unreliable chain link setup. They bolted chains to each corner of the platform, bolted the drums to the platform, and then connected the chains in each corner to a big hook that was attached to another chain. Then they got 4 big roadies to pull me up on pulleys. It was always an adventure. Some nights, some of the crew were shit-faced and they didn't pull up evenly, so the drums would go sliding off to one side. Many nights the chain would drop slack and the whole kit would drop down 2 or 3 feet. It was enough of a jolt to knock the drums over and almost knock me off the platform. I was petrified every time they cranked me up. My life was literally in those guys' hands until we had enough money to come up with a hydraulic lift system to get me airborne. But that was the beauty of Neil. He was as much of a dreamer and a showman as we were, and he had the balls to take everything to the next level. Eventually Joyce married Neil, Bill bought out her share of the management company, and Joyce and Neil went on to have a beautiful marriage. With such a great team surrounding us, we were firing on all cylinders. And we were all happy. We were all looking out for each other in whatever way we could. Gene used his book smarts to make sure that all the business dealings were on the up and up. I handled the physical. If you dared to touch Gene or Paul or Ace, I'd kick your ass. I loved those three guys and they were as close to me as family, maybe even closer. I was easily the most dangerous of the four of us, so if we got in a situation where we were threatened by tough guys from other bands or their crew, I was immediately right in the front going, "Oh, really, you're going to what?" And the situation would suddenly change, because you really didn't want to go up against a 28-year-old Peter Criss. I always loved the adrenaline and I loved the battle. In those early days, Paul likened Kiss to a car with four wheels. It was true, we needed each other to move on smoothly. And at the beginning we did move smoothly. We were true brothers in arms, brothers on stage, brothers in the darkness. All for one and one for all. If any of us ever deviated from this team effort and began to get a swelled head, we had a very simple reality check. Maybe it came from putting on our makeup so much. But if someone got off by putting other people down, one of us would say, "You're going to talk about so, and so." Look in the mirror and then say that again. On October 10, 1973, we went into Bell Sound Studios to record our first album. We had hired Kenny Kerner and Richie Wise as producers, which to me was baffling. We had done a dynamite demo with Eddie Kramer, why weren't we using him? I didn't know it at the time, but Kerner and Wise went back a long way with Bill and Neil. They were in a group that recorded for Neil and they went on to produce for him. So they got the gig. I really liked Kenny, but Richie and I didn't get along at all. To me, Wise was the best kisser I'd ever seen. You're right, Gene. You're right, Paul. It was nauseating. I put my whole heart and soul into everything I played on those sessions. Warren Dewey, the engineer, and I went through hundreds of snare drums to try to get a really big drum sound. When I was finished laying down the drum tracks, I left my part was done, unless I had to sing a song or do harmonies. But when I came in for the listening session, I was dumbfounded. Kerner and Wise's job was to capture the energy of the live show on vinyl, but it wasn't there. There were no balls between those grooves. I guess it was unrealistic to expect otherwise, because Kerner and Wise were too old school. They were making us sound like a pop band. I hated the way they mixed the drums. To my taste, they had great songs, masterpieces, even, and they made them sound pedestrian. The strength and the energy and the power of our band had been blunted. We were all really let down. But 1973 had been quite a monumental year for us. And we were going to ring it out with the first gig of our new era. We were booked to do the New Year's Eve show at the Academy of Music, opening for Blue Oyster Cult, Teenage Lust, and Iggy and the Stooges. In the dressing room, Gene set the tone. "Let's kill them tonight," he said in his deep monotone. "Once we're done, nobody's going to want to see these other guys." That was our beautiful arrogance. We were the opening act, but the other acts went crazy when they came to the venue and saw a 10 by 4-foot neon sign that lit up and said Kiss. The sign was a surprise from Bill to us. I'll never forget sitting in the back of the theater before the doors opened and just staring at that sign. I knew we were destined for stardom after seeing that. But our rise to the top could have easily been derailed that night. Gene lit some flash paper and threw it into the crowd and, unfortunately, it hit a kid in the eye. This was a major lawsuit waiting to happen, and Bill could have lost his whole business. But we were such innovative con artists. Bill ushered the kid backstage after the show and we had him pose with us for a photo, and then Bill gave him a lifetime pass to the Academy of Music. That kid wasn't the only thing Gene burned. That night, during Firehouse, Gene unveiled his fire breathing for the first time in public. He spit out the kerosene and the flames went spiking into the darkness, but when he tried to put the lit torch down it accidentally caught his hair on fire. But Sean was quick to the rescue. He came running out on stage like a hero and, he dramatically threw his leather jacket over Gene's head, patting out the fire. Then Sean just as dramatically pulled his jacket off Gene's hair and ran off the stage. That drama queen deserved an Oscar for that performance. Afterward, the other bands came up to us and said, "Wow, you guys burn yourselves, huh? That's pretty heavy. You do that every night?" We had to tell them it wasn't really part of the show. As great as that first show was, we topped it the next time we played. On January 8, 1974, we played a press preview show at the Fillmore East. This was my dream come true. The Fillmore had been closed for a while, and I couldn't believe that. Neil had talked them into letting us rent it for a week for this gig. The Fillmore had been the cathedral of my youth. I had been in that audience countless times watching The Doors, Hendrix, The Airplane, and The Who. Now I was going to share the same stage with all those icons. I definitely felt ghosts in that place. We were rehearsing there for about a week and sometimes I'd come in early and go upstairs and sit in the balcony and close my eyes and I could feel all the people, the changes, the shit that went on there. The dressing room itself was heaven. The walls were completely filled with the scrawled autographs of every superstar who had played there. I really wanted to cut a piece of the wall off and take it with me. The night of the press party came and we had about 300 invited press, friends, and family in the audience. Before we went on, I looked in the dressing room mirror. I was wearing a brand new full leather jumpsuit with silver studs going up the sides. Sean had put us through incredible paces, and I felt like Tyson going into the ring. I looked around at the other three guys. We were all greased, oiled, and we looked badass. Our big gimmick then was a big black candelabra on stage that held 13 candles. One of the roadies would come out while the house was still dark and light each candle, one by one. When the last candle was lit, the house lights suddenly came up and there we were, on stage and blasting away. I looked out from my perch behind the drums and I saw Lydia and my mother and my brother and sisters all crying. I just hit those skins harder and looked up into the empty balcony and knew that we were heading straight for the top.